very excited to introduce tonight's talk. We have some special speakers for our programs tonight as we celebrate the Conservancy's 25th anniversary. Our focus is on the evolution of our education and stewardship programs on Napatree. The Napatree Point Conservation Area is the most pristine barrier spit ecosystem in southern New England. The Conservancy has made its stewardship a priority from its beginning and recognized its potential in serving as a living laboratory for educational programs. Tonight's speakers may be familiar to all of you, but I'm going to introduce them to you now anyway. Their two talks will follow each other with minimal interruption, and we'll ask that you hold your questions till the end of both talks. Our first talk, Steve Brown and Hugh Markey were hired in 2007 to develop our summer educational programs. Both are very accomplished educators, and you know this if you've ever been very lucky to have them out there leading one of your tours. Steve is the science chair at Pine Point School in Stonington. When not teaching kids on Napatree or Pine Point, Steve's also a gentleman farmer, tending to his vegetable crops and roadside stand in Stonington. Hugh Markey retired last year from a distinguished career teaching English at Pilgrim High School in Warwick. He is a prolific science writer, and his articles appear in all major newspapers and magazines throughout New England. Steve and Hugh, the architects to our flagship education program, the Napatree Investigators, will describe the goals of the program and the curriculum they have developed over the years. Once Steve and Hugh are all finished, Dr. Peter August will follow up. Pete is a professor emeritus at the University of Rhode Island Department of Natural Resource Sciences, where he taught GIS mapping and landscape ecology for 38 years. In 2010, he was on a team of scientists from the Rhode Island Natural History Survey who conducted the ecological assessment of Napatree. On completion of the project, Chap Barnes and Grant Simmons had a very good thought. They asked Pete to form a small group of science and advisors to guide the Conservancy in its science, its stewardship, and monitoring of programs on Napatree. And for the past few years, Pete has served as the president of Watch Hill Conservancy and the head of our Napatree Science Advisor Committee. So please join me in welcoming three incredible individuals who are out on Napatree, educating, informing, and helping us guide the next generation of conservationists, Steve, Hugh, and Pete, for this evening's talk.
So, very happy to be here. I've been here for a long time, 17, 18 years, and happy to always work with Hugh. I thought I'd start out a little bit by just talking about what you see up here. So what you see up here isn't how we began. We have t-shirts here, thanks to Daniel. He started that a couple years ago. And this is just kind of the end of a really fabulous run that we've had here with the investigators. As you look at these pictures, I'd like you just to kind of see the joy, because that's our goal. We really want joy. We want science mixed in with that joy. And we want that curiosity and passion that kids have for all things to have them have that on Napatree. So lots of kids come to Napatree, they go swimming, they play volleyball, they build sandcastles, but how many of them, right, knew what else was out there? And that was really why the program was developed. And when Chap and Grant came to me and said, hey, we really want to do this, I was like, great, because I've got a growth mindset, and I've been an educator for a long time. I'd love to tackle this, see how it goes. So I did some research. There were really no other programs out there at the time. So it was Julia Royster and I, and we had a learning curve, and we had a great time as we were learning. So how does this dovetail with the Conservancy? So here's the mission statement. Conserve, enhance, and maintain the natural, scenic, and historic values of Watch Hill and Little Narragansett Bay. So we'll be talking, obviously, about kind of the conserving and the enhancing part. So here we have a young man, Hugh still remembers his name.
Aliu.
And he's like the epitome of a student coming out for our program. So you can see he's all on his own, he's got his magnifying glass, he's got his book, he's totally into what he's found, and he's trying to look it up. And that's our goal. Notice there's no educator there, right? So we're kind of guides on the side. We provide the tools, we provide the opportunity, a couple hours out there, and then if he gets stuck, because after all, that's a high school book he's looking through. If he gets stuck, then we can kind of teach him how to use that book and help him find what he's looking for. So again, here's another image where, right, there's no adults there. Hugh's in the back, and he's just letting the kids go. They're curious, they're exploring, they're sharing with each other. As we all know, right, people with children, if you've been with children a lot, their friends mean more to themselves, right, than the adults in the room. So that's kind of our goal. So sometimes if you come out, you might see Hugh and I talking, and the kids are out there doing their thing, and they come to us, and they're like, hey, check this out, look what we found. We have some first steps in 2007. Chap and Grant contacted me through Susan Kozel, who worked at Pine Point School as well as me. I was a science teacher, still am, 31 years there, and I was also the department chair for science, and she said, oh, this is perfect for you. And so when Grant and Chap showed up and proposed this, I was so excited to jump right in. So the idea of the investigators, Julia Royster and I during lunch were like, we got to come up with a really good name. We got to come up with a good name. Well, what do we want the kids to do? Well, we want them to investigate, to do hands-on, student-driven beach explorations. And everybody at the time, and we still are pretty emphatic about this, that it really needs to be free. We really want to be able to offer this to any child who's able to get to that beach in any of our local towns. And of course, we have people vacationing here. And so this year we grabbed some people saw us in the program, and I'm like, I got some openings the next day. And so they were able to join us, which is great. In the beginning, it was a 3-hour program. It was based on inquiry. So again, the kids asking the questions, the kids curious, a lot of serendipity out there on the beach. What are we going to find? It was 3 days a week, a morning and an afternoon session. The afternoon session was pretty hot. It wasn't well attended because you can imagine trying to get kids there and back. So that kind of went away after a while. And we marketed through the Westerly Library and word of mouth. And in the beginning, it was me and Julia Royster. And this year, Julia came back with her children. So we had a generational moment. So in 2009, after the program kind of got off a little slowly because nobody really knew about it, we started marketing, and then really it was the word of mouth. It was the flyers sent out through the school systems, and was the Westerly Library. Those are really our big marketing areas. But I would say 90% of it is word of mouth. So more students returned each year and came back each week, so there was a need for a theme-based curriculum, and so we came up with 6 themes. And when Hugh joined the club, he thought that would be a really good idea, and we took off with it the next year. And then by 2013, we realized, we're overbooked. We have 20 people a session. There's only 2 of us. So another naturalist was added, and then we just kind of by chance, one of the parents said, hey, my kid really loves this program, but they're too old now. And I'm like, well, let's have him be a helper. Let's have him graduate into being a helper. And so that was a program that we've started. We had no idea we were going to do that. And so that was a really rewarding experience for us, because that's the goal of the program, right? We want the kids to have such a great time that they want to get up at 8 in the morning. Think about this, they're teenagers. They want to get up at 8 in the morning, get to the beach, and help educate the next generation. We also had teens of local residents who volunteered. Some of them would receive community service for that. And then we realized that we needed to add a 7th theme. So I'm going to turn it over to Hugh, who's going to talk about those themes.
Sure. So we mentioned before there are about 6 and then later on 7 themes that we were going to work with. At first we started talking about them as a lesson plan, And then we realized we were being way too teacherly on this, so we probably wouldn't have any kids who wanted to show up for that. So what we did is we came up with themes instead. It sounds a little less academic to call it so. And part of the reason we did that is to leave room for, as again, serendipity, we're going to use that word a lot. The things that are up on the beach that you never expected to see, that surprise the kids, in some cases surprise us. And it's really important that we had the flexibility. We're not trying to get through a session. We were just there to, sure, we had a framework, but we also wanted to just sort of let things flow and see what turns up. And you'll see a couple of those instances in the few slides ahead. This is our crabbing. This is one of our two most popular programs. The kids have a great time. One of the things I like about it is one of the, you can see down the bottom there, there's a white tub, and that's full of crabs. And we really work hard to get the kids to be confident enough to actually reach in and grab a crab. Because there is a way, at least with green crabs, don't hold me responsible for blue crabs. That's a whole other thing. Don't want to touch blue crabs if you can help it. But green crabs, there's a special spot where you can grab them in the back, and they can't reach back to pinch you. And we had to do a lot of work in some cases. In most cases, it worked. We usually were able to persuade the students or the child to try it out toward the end. And to see a kid go from that to wanting to be able to hold these things, first thing to do when they get back to the gazebo is say, "Mom, guess what? I had crabs in my hand." That's a real thrill. That's one of the many gifts that we get for being out there. And as we do it, this is, Steve is often brave enough to go and stick his hands in those tubs. One of the things that we do, there is a science background with this. We teach them how to sex the animals. We separate them out. We look at things like where perhaps a leg or a pincher has been broken off, and the fact that these things can regenerate. And we talk with them a little bit about that idea. Some of them have no claws, and we ask them about, well, what do you think is going to happen here? How is this going to resolve itself? And so they had to learn what was expected of them. And when they came up, again, they'd come up with their nets. They'd have to reach in most cases, to go and grab it, and then they'd have to figure out, is this a male or a female? So, and there's a couple of this year's guys up there. They've learned the lesson about holding on to the crabs. So they're just pretty proud of themselves. If you're ever interested in crabbing, real simple thing to remember is hot dogs. That's our secret, particularly really inexpensive gross hot dogs. They seem to really attract the crabs readily. Another thing I like about this, and I'm going to move on to the next one, but another thing I like is that crabbing is often done, more often than not, we have the kids do it in pairs. So this gives the kids an opportunity to work with a kid that maybe they have no idea who the kid is. And they just ask, because one kid is going to hold on to the net to grab scoop it right under the crab, and the other one is going to be the one holding the bait down there trying to get out. And it's a nice little teamwork example that we have, so that, sometimes you get a little kid who gets to work with a big kid. That's a thrill. So that's just another side benefit that we have of the crabbing program. This guy actually showed up for the first time since, I don't think I've remembered seeing, this is a spider crab, as a lot of you know, most of you know. We caught a live spider crab this year up by the rocks where the rest of the crabbing was taking place. And you can see Steve there pointing out different aspects of the spider crab, and again, talking about, it looks like maybe he's missing one. Missing a leg. So it's a great opportunity to just take advantage of that. And then for the end of that particular activity is our famous crab race. This is one of the reasons why the kids get such a kick out of it. We have each of the kids grab a crab. We put a line in the sand, and after a little countdown, then it's time, and the crabs are off. And there's a lot of yelling and encouraging going on as we always were screaming and hollering, telling them that the one's about to leave, and another one's buried itself in the sand, and so forth. So that's a lot of fun for them. Another one of these themes that we have is taking a look at seine nets. You can see one down toward the bottom if you haven't seen one before. It looks like just a stick wrapped up. I think we'll see a better picture of it shortly. But basically, this is to give them a chance to take a close-up look at some of the local fish that we have, the small ones, because they might see them swimming by them, but they don't necessarily have a chance to actually look at them closely, examine them, see if they can identify them. And you can see that once again, we've got our lovely white plastic tubs. We've got kids there with dip nets, and they're all trying to find out where these things belong, how these things survive, maybe what things they eat and survive on. And I just kind of like that picture, even though it's a little crooked, because here's the mighty fisherman. This guy is about 4 feet tall, and he was out there. And what's fun about it is we have the kids decide who's going to go deep and who's going to stay shallow. And it's really funny to see those who will stay shallow and those who will go deep. It does not follow any pattern, believe me. He was one of the smaller guys, and he wanted to go deep, and he did. No trouble at all.
And also, what's great about this is that in the beginning, when we show them how to do it, they're excited that we're doing it. But then once we come up with a load of fish, everybody's hands going up. I want to do it next. I want to do it next. So.
Absolutely. There's the process. You can see a little bit better there. They're all taking a little dip nets around to see what else they can find that we haven't covered so far. Taking a look at what we have here. And others in the background still exploring using their own nets. More of the same, just kind of taking a look. You can see a little better view of the seine net down there at the bottom. We bring it out. We have the kids pick up all the live animals that we can find. And then eventually we examine them and then return them to the water. And talking about serendipity, one of the things that we found this year was an Atlantic pufferfish. This is extremely rare for us. I think we found maybe one other pufferfish. In 16 years, we've only seen these one other time. So that was pretty amazing. And then we move on to our third theme, which is, if you're a Rhode Islander and born and raised, maybe you would call it quahogging. That's me. Others would call it clamming, and that's, I guess, is okay too. So we give them a little lesson in how to do this sort of activity. And what we do is we have this kind of little two ways of doing it. First of all, we have the traditional rake where you got the pole and you got the basket underneath, and you're sort of dragging it along that way. That's what Steve chooses to use.
Which works the best?
First, not really. I just humor him because otherwise we'll be here all night. And then there's the more masculine method, which is mine, where we have you use your feet. How many of you have ever tried quahogging with your feet? A few of you have. Good deal. This is something I learned to do from my dad. We lived up the street from Greenwich Bay when I was growing up. When it was low tide, there really wasn't much for us to do in the way of swimming, so we just go quahogging or clamming. And you just sort of move your feet back and forth until you feel that hard object under there, dunk down and grab it. Hopefully it's not a crab, and it turns out to be a quahog. Well, we did the same thing here. Some of the kids chose to work with Steve, some of them chose to work with me. When we find something, then basically what I would do, and I remember doing this with my dad, he would have his leg out to one side and say, okay, it's right here. If you can move your foot, put it on top of mine, and then move it out of the way, and you'll see where it is. And, the kid says, okay, I got it. Goes down and grabs it. So it was a lot of fun. We do have these little competitions periodically here, but I wouldn't trust, depends on who you ask. This is a youngster that's, you can tell that she's got the basket, the traditional quahog rake. She's got a surf clam in her hands and a great big grin on her face. So we like that. She got that all by herself, by the way. Sometimes we sort of help out the kids, but that was all on her own. Another surprise was this huge whelk. Certainly one or two of that size that we found. We find lots of whelk shells, but not very many live ones, and very few of that size. So you can see that she was pretty happy about finding that. Again, putting them in the water so we can kind of see what they do if any of them decide they're going to open up a little bit. Then our fourth theme is lagoon experiences. If you've been out there in the last year or two, you may know that the lagoon is pretty odoriferous at low tide. And we've been going out there for years, so we figured we're not going to stop going just because it doesn't smell very good, because there are lessons to be learned there as well. And we talked about why it smells the way it does and it looks the way it does. And you can see at this point, the kids are sort of thinking about what they want to do, whether they want to get into the water a little bit. And that seems to change pretty suddenly. This is a guy he's like 6 feet tall. He is probably maybe a little too old for the program. Remember, some of the kids are like 6, and he's more like 6 feet. He's probably about 15 years old. But he got into it. Next thing I know, he's walking around without his shoes, and he said, once upon a time, those were white socks. I don't think he could say the same no matter how many times you wash it. And again, a little bit of competition for us. One thing we love to do is we love to have clamshell races. And each of the kids goes around and finds a good clamshell that they like. And at the right time, then we line them up and start chasing them down this little rivulet sort of thing that comes out of the lagoon. We have a great time, and lots of yelling and screaming in those times too. So just another. And this, by the way, just so you know, this is not mud. These are actually periwinkles that they found and gathered in the nets. So tide pools, we love doing that. We go way out to the top, the tip of Napatree, and it's kind of cool because the kids always end up just sort of wandering around and doing what they want to do. Once again, bringing things around, wandering off, and showing them to their friends, identifying them when they can. Just a real quick, you can see where everybody's kind of doing their own thing. I think this was taken by one of our student helpers. So, oh yeah. So one of the last things that we do in the course of this is we came up with this idea that it might be nice to have them collect something. And so what we did is we came up with the idea of handing the kids out these boxes with little compartments in them. And each of them originally were about 1 inch apiece. And we would tell them that obviously we don't normally take things from the beach. We certainly don't take any live animals off the beach. But this one time we can get together and we can find things that we want to take home with us. And the idea is this sort of winter daydreaming. I always kind of think of it as a chance for the kids to maybe in the dark days of January and February, maybe they'll reach into their drawer, their chest of drawers, and pull that out and kind of remember all the cool things that we did by looking at those shells or the rocks or whatever it was that they chose to bring with them. That's probably for me, huh? Okay, so last but not least, we talked about the idea that the last theme is, it's sort of one that runs all the way through the program. We try to model the proper beach behavior, conservation measures. We talk a lot about how important it is to leave the beach at least as neat as you found it, staying where you belong, picking up debris. We always have a kid, at least one kid or one of the adults are carrying a garbage bucket with them on these adventures so they can go and, they learn to help take care of the beach because that's what's really important. Well, we have too many of these things, I think. So just a quick thing, we always share what we found and what we did at the end of it, which is kind of cool because it gives the kid a chance to talk in front of a group. This is a little dogfish that certainly sparked a lot of interest. There's quite a nice size striped bass, which I did not catch, but it was just somehow it had washed up. So we actually ended up doing a necropsy on that, but I'm going to spare you that little pleasure. But again, the kids thought it was great. So here's another one of our helpers. This is Aiden Oakley. His dad is part of our science committee.
we go back one?
Yeah.
So here we have, right, a helper with his arms up, and then we have a naturalist who was here last year. Her name's Maddie Smith. And this is such a great story. I just want to take a minute and talk about it. So Maddie Smith was kind of voluntold that she was going to help Hugh and I over the summer because she had some experience working with kids as a coach. And so she came along, and she was kind of quiet and a little reserved the first couple weeks, and then she kind of got the idea of like, oh, this is how it works. And so she joined us, and we started talking about Pine Point and school, and her sister is a teacher. And then before you knew it, she was like all over this education idea, to the point where we had an opening at my school, a one-year opening for a science teacher, and she asked, what do you think of my chances? And I said, well, you're great with kids, that's for sure. And, you know, you're young and you really want to learn and you have that energy and you have the education behind you. And so my school hired her after interview process, which I stayed out of. And she was phenomenal. She was awesome with the middle schoolers. And you all know, right, how middle schoolers can be. She was great. She wanted to relocate closer to her boyfriend. So after she left Pine Point, she went up to Massachusetts, and she is now teaching biology in a high school. So because of this program, right, and a little bit of help from Daniel, who got her in there, right, we have like a kind of another serendipitous moment where not only are we impacting children, right, but we're impacting college kids, and we're all giving them opportunities to come out and be with kids, learn about the science, but also, hey, maybe this is my future. And so you want to click onto the next one? And so we have other naturalists, Laura Craver-Rogers. She used to work with us for a number of years as an educator, and also worked at the Denison Pequot Seapost. Maybe some of you recognize her. And this is that boy who was seining earlier. This is Ari, and he kind of had enough of that. I think the water was cold. You know, it wasn't the greatest day, and he started looking at birds. And so again, when we have enough people to help us out. So Paige is here, and Paige just went off. Like, Hugh and I were in the water.
Hi, Paige.
Good job, Paige. We were in the water, and all of a sudden we saw Paige and Ari, like, looking up birds because he was so interested in the ospreys that were flying over. And so, like, perfect, right? That's what he was interested in. And here's Emily, right, learning about animals. One-on-one, student probably came up to Emily and, check this out.
Emily, you back there? Hi.
And here's kind of a timeline of naturalist educators through the years. So all these people have had an impact on kids, and those kids have had an impact on them. And these are local teams and those graduate helpers that I was telling you about. There's more than this, but my memory only serves me back to 2013. And I'm sure some of you in this room recognize some of those people on that list. And, you know, and of course our managers, right, who support our program in many different ways, and even coming out and helping educate when maybe somebody's sick or when we need an extra hand, Janice Sassy and Daniel Cole. And as Chap Barnes would say, right, we really want to have people have respectful enjoyment of Napatree Point Conservation Area, and kind of everybody's motto, I think, would be, you'll protect a place that you love.
Thank you.
Okay, let me summarize for all of you what your science advisors, many of the staff, a slew of graduates all do out on Napatree in our science and stewardship programs. I'm going to go through this fast and talk to you about a lot of different projects. And one thing I want to do is remember to tell you what we learn in these various studies and projects and why we do it. So let's take it back to the beginning. Since this is our 25th birthday, things really kicked off in 1999 with our founding leaders, Fred, Chap, and Grant. And Janice remembered Chap's phrase early on, you can't steward what you don't understand. So very soon in the process, they commissioned the Rhode Island Natural History Survey to go out to Napatree and do ecological surveys and assessments to learn what's out there, but most importantly, to identify what the pressing management needs are. One of the recommendations from the 05 survey is for the Conservancy to staff up, and that's when Hugh and Steve and Julia, Tom Papadilla to mind the gate, and Janice Sassy were hired. And in 2010, they did a 5-year update for the ecological assessment. I was on that team and part of that project. To go back a little bit, I definitely want to acknowledge that there was a lot of fantastic management and stewardship happening on Napatree prior to the advent of the Conservancy, and that was through the Fire District and the Park Commission on the Fire District and their Napatree Conservation Committee. And they really had done a fantastic job establishing a management program which kicked in when with these natural history survey assessments. One of the initial recommendations of the 2010 assessment was rather than doing these surveys every 5 years, the Conservancy should pull together a small team of scientists who can be on call to address any issues that would serendipitously come up. And so all of our science advisors are pictured in here. There's in the group picture in our first meeting, Keith Killingbeck, botany, Howie Ginsberg, entomology, Peter Payton, ornithology. The big guy in the back is John Boothroyd, who is a coastal geologist. Janice at the time was a Napatree manager. Unfortunately, Dr. Boothroyd passed away too early, and so we asked his last graduate student, Brian Oakley, to come aboard. We added a marine scientist, Nicole Rohr, who then took a job in Boston, and now Alan Debonet, the assistant director for the Sea Grant program, does our marine conservation. Things really became legitimate in 2013 when the conservation easement was approved, which gave the Conservancy the responsibility of stewarding Napatree with a couple of really fundamental charges. One, to protect the conservation values of Napatree, and number two, to ensure the public has access to this special place. One of the longest running projects we do is monitoring, and we monitor to understand what our baseline situations are, so when change happens, we recognize it. We monitor to understand what normal variation is, and when we should be excited when things change so much and not. And we do a lot of monitoring in support of and in collaboration with regional programs. Daniel showed you the video of the revegetation of a washover fan. Every time that we have a big storm, and Janice Sassy got this in spades, when our visitors see washover fans, the first thing they say, Napatree's ruined, the dune grass is gone. And give that dune grass 3 months and it pops up. And so we wanted to memorialize that with Daniel's video. Napatree is forever changing. This is one of our naturalists on Napatree, Jessica Cressman, and this is a ink blot print of the Napatree outline from 1939 to present. If you go out there as often as the science advisors and the staff, you won't believe how it's always changing. Some of our monitoring has been going on a long time. Grant Simmons has been doing water quality monitoring every Friday morning from April through October for 17 years. He's on a streak. He hasn't missed a day in the last couple of years. And The data that he collects goes into the URI Watershed Watch database. It's available for anybody to download. That data set is going to be a gold mine when the town of Westerly finishes its enhanced nitrogen removal capacity for the wastewater treatment plant. Because we have a terrific data run with the wastewater treatment facility functioning now, and we'll be able to see what kind of improvements are made. A couple of years ago, we recognized Ray Larson's bird surveys. He started those in 60 years ago. Ray is now in his late 80s, and he started them as a young man when he was on land. He was a surgeon in the submarine fleet, and when he wasn't at sea, he was on Napatree looking at birds. This statistic totally blows me away. With Ray's lists, which are all registered in a nationally available Cornell database called eBird, we have 307 species, thanks to Ray and a few other folks, observed on Napatree. That is 72% all the known species of birds ever seen in Rhode Island. So Napatree is a significant location for bird biodiversity. We've been monitoring horseshoe crabs with Sacred Heart University. They started that 27 years ago. Horseshoe crabs are, in terms of migratory birds, they provide the fuel that get our migrants to Canada and the Arctic. Our plover surveys have been going on 25 years with Fish and Wildlife. Daniel told you this year was a bumper year with 18 fledglings. Daniel, we need to redo those statistics and calculate the number of fledglings per linear mile of available space. Napatree is going to be way ahead of the game. They really packed in a lot of birds. Joe Zabrowski, a Westerly high school teacher, as a hobby, did fall surveys of migratory hawks for 26 years. He would go up to the top of the main dune for a month in September, October, and record the number of individual hawks of each species he observed. And he's turned that data set over to the Conservancy. And it's a fantastic data set, a great record of changes in bird of prey populations around. Brian Oakley, a name that you've heard a couple of times, every quarter does dune transects, where he takes an elevation within a centimeter or two using his RTK GPS to measure the height of the dune along those transects. And his data allows us to know how much erosion or accretion of sand we've had before or after storms. Because of his surveys, if you ask the question, how long did it take Napatree to recover from Superstorm Sandy? 5 years. It took 5 years for the sand that got lost in Sandy to build up. And so these long-term monitoring data help us really understand when change happens, what's going to happen after that. We've been doing camera trapping since 2013. We put cameras out every winter. We now have 13 species on record. This one was fantastic. We found a fox dun with a breeding pair and kits on the inside. We have thousands of pictures of foxes doing everything that foxes do. It was a real gold mine. This is an important data set. Tom Papadilla, who works the entrance, and our naturalists do visitor counts every day. Tommy records the number of people coming on Napatree. That's Tommy right there at the door. Tom, we're going to give you a big shout out. Woohoo! And Tommy's data and the naturalist count data are critically important for us to know what kind of visitor usage we're getting. A couple of years ago, we did the math. We had 44,000 visits. Those are people coming onto Napatree, thanks to Tommy's data. And with the naturalist data, we know that half of the people on the beach don't walk by Tommy, they come in by boat. And so that 44,000 is a low number when you look at those really busy summer weekends. And so those count data are important to us. They help us understand visitor patterns. And so we've looked at these data relative to daily weather patterns and that sort of thing. And you don't have to be a statistician or a rocket scientist to know if it's a cloudy, cold, rainy summer day, we're not going to get a lot of people on Napatree. But we also have continual visitors all year round, and in the dead of winter, we'll have people out there in the morning enjoying the peaceful solitude of Napatree. We've conducted a lot of kind of one-time surveys. Mark Mello with the Natural History Survey did a moth study, 161 species. Howie Ginsberg and Aya Rothwell did a bee survey, 53 species. Who would have thunk we have 53 species of bees on Napatree? And they had, in their work, 5 new records for the state. Every couple of years, we do a survey of invasive plants so that we know where they are and we can remove them. That's Hope Leeson, our science advisor, helping with that. Between the cut and Napatree, prior to Hurricane Sandy, we had one of the largest patches of eelgrass in the state of Rhode Island. After Sandy, that big patch between Napatree and the cut disappeared. And the idea is, our thinking was there was so much wave energy sweeping around the western point of Napatree, it buried and ripped out a lot of that eelgrass. It seems to be coming back, and last week, Alan and Brian and Daniel and Emily in the back were all out on Napatree counting eelgrass stems and 10 transects so we can monitor the recovery on that western end. In a couple of weeks, we'll remap our mussel beds. American oyster catchers are our most colorful, iconic bird. Plovers are okay, but the oyster catchers are really beautiful. They live and breed on Sandy Point, but they come over to Napatree to eat our shellfish. And our mussel beds are expanding. If you walk that bayside, 5 years ago, you wouldn't have seen a single mussel on that far eastern end, and now the mussel beds over there are getting bigger. I've been doing bat surveys on Napatree, and I can tell you that the bat fauna in May, June, and July is really ho-hum. Napatree's not a great place if you're a bat, but August, September, it's on fire because babies have been born, babies and mothers are now fattening up for winter, and as they travel up and down the coast, especially our migratory species, which some are here, but winter in Georgia and the southeast, they're hugging the coast and their migratory flights home right over Napatree. I'll get 800 bat passes in one evening at one location, and that's bats flying by within 15 meters. And you know what? You never see this. You're not in the right place at 2 o'clock in the morning. You're not looking, but we do all this with electronics and acoustic detectors. It's been very interesting. We've done a number of drone surveys for elevation, high-resolution true color imagery, and we're waiting on an elevation data set with a LiDAR sensor that we put on as a big drone package. This story here is, let me get the pointer, really, really interesting. The connection between the lagoon and Little Narragansett Bay has essentially closed up. It's no longer free-flowing. And that's this year. It's a relatively recent change. See this light gray line? These are the daily tide cycles measured in Watch Hill Harbor. There's a USGS tide gauge at the Dockmaster Station. When we first did our tide measurements in the lagoon about 8 years ago, the lagoon had a mirror image, daily high tide, low tide, as Watch Hill Harbor. Look at it now. The lagoon is the dark line. It's flatlined, meaning no water's coming in, no water's going out, until we start getting some really high tides. And that's changed a lot of the biology of the lagoon. We are continuing to do fish seining. 5 years ago, we would put out 4 crab traps and get 300 or 400 green crabs. With Alan's help and some of the great naturalists, we've been continuing this summer. We get essentially 0 green crabs, and now we get some rather big blue crabs. We've almost required stitches to heal some of the wounds in our hands from handling those blue crabs. They're really, really nasty. And Brian and his students have been doing regular transects of the elevation of the sand, which is coming around and kind of building up from around the western tip of Napatree. And Brian and his team is recording all that with their GPS systems. We not only protect Napatree, but we try to make it better we try to increase the condition of the place when we can. We've done a lot of plant restoration. To date, we've put in 2,500 plants that can survive on Napatree and provide benefit to pollinators. We have restored 1 osprey platform and put in 2 others. These kids around that root system are members of the Youth Conservation League. These are high school students organized by Audubon Society, the Nature Conservancy, and the Natural History Survey to do work in conservation areas. And so we've hired them to pull our various invasives. And we have learned from the National Park Service a great fencing mechanism is split rail cedar, because it tells people don't go in here, but sand can go back and forth. It doesn't trap sand like the old traditional dune fencing. And so this helps kind of the natural geological processes on Napatree. And there's some fantastic technology out there that you guys might not know about. If you've gone out to the West End, you've seen that antenna out there. No, it's not Taylor Swift's personal cell phone repeater tower, which I think some of our naturalists have been known to tell visitors what it is when they ask. This is called a Motus antenna. There's 2,000 of these between Canada and South America, and when birds carrying a transmitter fly within 5 or 6 kilometers, this records their presence, their altitude, and which way they're moving. We had some wonderful students this summer banding ruddy turnstones in June. This is one bird banded on 1 June in Napatree, and through the Motus towers, it was in Montreal on 2 June. 2 days for a bird this big. Pretty exciting stuff, And on a good year, we'll get 20,000 bird records passing by our antenna. This is a brand new instrument that we put out a couple of weeks ago with Dr. Peter Payton. He's been involved in a study putting GPS tags on greater backback gulls on Block Island in red and the dumplings just off Fisher's Island in blue. And these tags record a GPS location wherever the bird is. It could be out in the open ocean every 20 minutes and stores it. When the bird gets near this base station and stops for a moment, the transmitter on the bird talks to the base station and downloads all the data that the bird's carrying around. And so this way, we have a perfect record of where the birds are. And the transmitters on the bird have a little solar cell. So there's no batteries to worry about. It's pretty amazing stuff. And so we're very excited about that new addition to the Napatree technology. Yes, we try to spread the love and get the word out in the peer-reviewed scientific journals that our science advisors are required to, this is the name of the game for us. I'm guessing that None of you have caught Brian's great article in Geosciences, how storms have driven Napatree, but that's okay. This is why we do our annual State of Napatree reports. They're written and illustrated so that anybody can read them, understand what's in there, and enjoy it with all the pictures. And we put them up on our website for a free download. This being our 25th anniversary and the 10th year that we've done the State of Napatree report, we went an extra mile and published hard copy and had a ton of design work done in this hard copy issue of the 2022 report. Everything that I've talked about so far has a chapter in here, and if you do the arithmetic, the thing that really impresses me is I think probably 60% of all the authors on all the papers are undergraduate or graduate students. So I want to go back to Hugh and Steve's comment about Napatree being a living laboratory. It certainly is for little kids, but also for big kids. We have a handful of signed copies here if you want to buy one. If you get it through Amazon, it's going to cost you $90. We'll give you one with signatures for $60. And we'll take names if you would like us to order you a copy. We can buy direct from the publisher at about $57 a copy. So if you want to have some can't put it down rating, this is for you. So with that, I would like to ask Hugh and Steve to come up, and we would be happy to answer any questions that you guys might have.